It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. Good morning again, everyone. With us now, Judith Sloan and Najla Said, who are holding 3 events in Manhattan and Brooklyn this month, trying to talk about Israel and Gaza, Jewish identity and Palestinian identity, and engage in dialogue rather than diatribe in a different kind of way. Judith is an actor, writer, educator, and radio producer, and Najla is an actor, writer, and activist. Their project is called Imperfect Allies, Children of Opposite Sides. It combines a 15-minute theater piece with a dialogue that follows among the audience members who sign up because they want to engage with people not like them, from diverse backgrounds, imperfect allies, if you will, children from opposite sides, as the title goes. They have 3 such events coming up in the next week that we'll tell you about. Before they join us live, we'll hear 2 excerpts from performances by each of them. First, here is a 2-minute excerpt in which Najla reads from her book, Looking for Palestine. It's her autobiography, talking about herself and her father.
My father was a teacher of English and comparative literature at Columbia University. I learned to pronounce that impressive-sounding title at the age of 4, though I had no idea what it meant. When people asked me what my daddy's job was, I'd wrap my brain in articulators around the phrase with great effort and draw it out. I did recognize the word Columbia, and I knew what that was. The park where we played after school and on weekends. I also knew that he did something in an office in that campus park. To very smart people who study a lot, Edward Said is the father of post-colonial studies. Or, as he told me once, when he insisted I was wasting my college education by taking a course on postmodernism, and I told him he didn't even know what it was. Know what it is, Najla. I invented it. I still don't know if he was joking or serious. To others, he's the author of Orientalism, the book that everyone reads at some point in college, whether in history, politics, Buddhism, or literature class. He wrote it when I was 4. As he explained once when I pressed him to put it into simple English, the basic concept is that historically, through literature and art, the East, as seen through a Western lens, becomes distorted and degraded, so that anything other than what we Westerners recognize as familiar is not just exotic, mysterious, and sensual, but also inherently inferior. You know, like Aladdin. It's mainly because of my father that people now say Asian American instead of Oriental.
Najla Said, a co-creator of the theater and dialogue project called Imperfect Allies, Children from Opposite Sides. That was an excerpt from her book, or reading of her book, Looking for Palestine. Now here's the other imperfect ally, Judith Sloan, whose previous theater works include Yo Miss and Denial of the Fittest, one-woman shows that played in New York, and she is co-author of the book Crossing the Boulevard, Strangers, Neighbors, Aliens in a New America. This excerpt is a minute and a half of a piece of hers called Dayenu. This is set at a Passover Seder, framed around a song that people sing at the Seder, for those of you unfamiliar, called Dayenu, which thanks God for freeing the Jewish people from bondage in ancient Egypt. And you'll hear the word Haggadah. The Haggadah is the book that tells the Passover story.
Each year at Passover, I think about, argue about, dream about, and question this question of Dayenu. Enough. Dayenu. I take down the silver-plated Haggadah given to me by my father when I was a little girl. This Haggadah, one of the few things I have left of him. I inherited the questioning, the dark eyes, dark hair, dark moods. I look through this Haggadah, a marriage of text and image, the pages designed like the pages of the Talmud, taken from the Talmud, multiple arguments on 2-page spreads in 4 colors. Is there enough to go around? Is my freedom dependent on your loss? The argument erupts every year at the Seder. An 80-year-old is criticizing the state of Israel. Israel should stop dehumanizing the Palestinians. A 60-year-old is defending Israel. What about Hamas? They'll stop at nothing. They call for the murder of Jews everywhere. The 20-year-old agrees with the 80-year-old. It's Israel's responsibility, too. The 40-year-old is trying to negotiate at the table. The 60-year-old cannot see the Palestinians as human. They are the enemy. But who is going to stop the path of mutual homicide? Suicide.
Judith Sloan there, after we heard from Najla Said. They are co-creators of the theater and audience participation project called Imperfect Allies, Children of Opposite Sides. They'll be presenting it tomorrow, Sunday, and next Wednesday, including conversations with audience members who want to participate. We'll tell you where shortly. And they join us now live. Judith, welcome back. And Najla, so nice of you to come, and welcome to WNYC.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us, Brian.
I see that you conceived of the Imperfect Allies project a few years ago, so before October 7th. Can you each talk a little about the original idea and goals for this project? Najla, want to start?
Sure. I originally met Judith because she hired me, and then she produced a sort of one-off performance of my solo show. And these are conversations that we've had between us for years, which we had decided we wanted to talk about publicly because my show on its own talks about me as a Palestinian, but to have the other voice there makes a huge difference. And we had such interesting conversations, and our original connection was through our having lost our fathers so young. And so we thought it might be a wonderful way to try to bring other people into this difficult subject matter and help them talk and listen.
Mm-hmm. Judith, same question.
Yes, that is true that we met not through Najla being Palestinian and me being Jewish, but because we had similar emotional kind of residual effects from our father's death, where we would react out of proportion to the present when we were losing things. So it was just as two women dealing with, oh, do you do that? Oh, yeah, I do that. Yeah, I cry out of proportion to the present. So then when we started working together, and I did hire Najla to read, to perform in Crossing the Boulevard years ago during when Trump had just become president, and we were doing a lot of multi-ethnic, multilingual performances with many different actors of all different ethnicities. And so we've been talking for years. There was also a part of Imperfect Allies that was a discussion with Black and Jewish artists as well. So this seemed like the perfect time for us to do this. And after October 8th, and after October 7th and 8th, I teach at NYU, and I teach on Monday nights, and I have Palestinian students and I have Jewish students, and people were coming to the class in, all kinds of distress. And then Najla and I both had started talking in October. We did a performance that had been planned originally, and then we turned it into something else as a benefit for Doctors Without Borders and had a dialogue. And then we realized, we should really try and figure out how to do these, because both of us had been in situations where we were in, I would say, I don't know what word to use, but kind of vitriolic discussions, and we wanted to do something different.
So we might talk about those excerpts that we played from each of your works, but would you set up for our listeners right away what the audience role is in the Imperfect Allies project, because that's such a big part of what makes these more than just going to a show, and we'll invite a few listeners in on this as well. So Najla, you want to introduce what the audience participation aspect is?
Sure. Well, what we did was we reached out to people who were interested, and we thought it would be a lot of Jewish people, a lot of Arabs, but we've gotten so many interesting people, some of whom come from regions of the world where there are similar conflicts. Some have no connection to it, but really would like to talk because they're scared and they want to ask questions. So what we're doing is we're going to start with the little performance, And then we're going to break into groups and encourage them to have conversations about what they fear, what they're confused about, and I think
hopes.
And hopes,
That's
yes.
what the
Always
third
positive.
section is.
But yeah, so what's been amazing is the people who have sort of signed up are actually, even in their little one-sentence blurb about why they want to do it, saying such profound things that I was personally very surprised. I thought it would really just be a bunch of people who wanted to just come and talk, and that's always an issue with this subject matter, that people come and make long commentary and don't listen. But so far, it seems like everyone has got a questioning attitude and a desire to make some sort of positive outcome from this. So that to me has been the most interesting. But yes, we're going to break them into groups, and then we're going to make people listen and talk.
Make them. But Brian, we're going to allow people to sort of share with the bigger group, but it's small groups. And Najla and I were both surprised. We didn't know what would happen, but we were surprised that so many people wanted to participate. And it's a hurdle, right? You have to answer a question to come. And at first we thought, well, maybe 10 people will come. But then when you get 90 responses, it shows us something.
Yeah. So people, just to be clear to our listeners, people don't just buy tickets. They fill out a form to answer the following question. I think I have it written down accurately here. In a few words, what draws you to participate in this event? We're just curious and want to be prepared to make this a thoughtful and purposeful event, right? So that question, you can't buy a ticket without passing through that form?
Yeah. Some people just say things like, I have one here, it's all I think about lately.
Yeah.
So but we do have some that we can share with you.
Yeah. You want to do that now?
Well, we're getting a lot of the cross sections of people and groups because with this conflict, everything's become so binary, sort of ironically, given the world is trying to understand what non-binary is. But so the first one, I am a Jewish Moroccan Israeli New Yorker, and I believe there are so many secret narratives and points of connection that aren't being highlighted. I want to be in them.
And I think that's something that we're also realizing. A lot of Arab Jews or Jewish Arabs are also signing up. And so where does that fit in this dialogue? And then here's one. I'm Palestinian, grew up in Chicago, but lived in Palestine for 3 years, victim of Israeli violence, taught at a Jewish school for 3 years in Brooklyn, also rented from a Hasidic family here. Adored my landlady's grandson, little Moishe, who used to plant plants with me and always asked about my animals. I could tell they really liked me, but were also afraid of me, which is a strange experience.
Yeah. So listeners, Najla and Judith want to invite some calls as kind of a mini version of what they're doing with their in-person audiences at their Imperfect Allies event. So if this sounds like the kind of thing you would want to participate in, what experiences or feelings of yours would you want to bring to share with people from the so-called other side? 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692. What hopes or fears or dreams or pain or love across the usual divide would you want to express in such a setting? Or what question might you want to ask an imperfect ally, a child of the other side, so to speak? Questions definitely welcome and encouraged. 212-433-WNYC, as they will model this right here on the show right now. 212-433-9692. And I probably don't have to say this, but what we don't want is people who just want to argue about which side is worse, which honestly is most of the phone calls we get, unless we ask a directed question like this. So let's try to avoid that in favor of what hopes or fears or dreams or pain or love across the usual divides in this respect would you want to express in a setting like Najla and Judith's Imperfect Allies events, or what question might you want to ask an imperfect ally, a child from the other side? Questions definitely welcome as well. 212-433-WNYC, 433-9692. Najla, you have Imperfect Allies events tomorrow and Sunday and next Wednesday. I'll invite you to give the specifics at the end of the segment. But have you done any already with anything to describe about how the audience interacted?
We haven't actually done any of this specific event before, but I have done, when I travel with my solo show and my book, I often find that I have discussions that are really interesting, but there's a point at which there's a question of, there's a lot of Jewish identity issues and things that I don't feel are my forte. So, and also to make people feel more safe, it's better to have the two of us so that nobody feels like they're not represented. People are surprisingly, if you get the right people who want to listen, they are surprisingly humble and honest, and really a lot of the vitriol goes away because they have someone in their face that they maybe don't know that is looking at them with an open heart and open ears. And it's a very different attitude to have than just arguing with someone on the street or, in a dinner party.
Yeah, or social media.
Yeah,
or
social media, oh my God.
Anti-social media for the dialogues. But, Brian, we have done these things separately. And so, yes, this is the first time we're doing it together. And some people, I think it's, there's so many different kinds of people in New York City. It is the world. And the likelihood of living across the street from somebody who, was an quote-unquote enemy in some other country is pretty high in the United States. And in New York City, years ago, I was invited into a high school to do some storytelling and community building between Tibetan and Chinese high school students, and talking about how the kids, the 15-year-olds and 16-year-olds, were not their government. And we also got somebody that answered the form and said that, she's from, when so much of our experience, I'm going to read it, when so much of our experience reduces us to violence, to reach across and create art that makes space for a different reality is a radical representation of our humanity. I also teach public humanities at NYU and Yale, and am of Tibetan heritage. Invisibility and silence are unfortunate realities that are all too familiar. So that's been interesting for me and Najla also, that it is a lot of Jews and Palestinians that are coming, but it's also African Americans and Tibetans and people from other places that are wanting to be able to have this kind of dialogue.
Here's a question via text message. Listener writes, Najla, I love this. Right now, though, the urgency is with Palestinians because they are being killed so rapidly with such ferocity with U.S. funds. My question is how they are dealing with this exact moment. And I would imagine you would get a fair amount like that at your events.
Well, we're actually got some calls from some Palestinian members or, audience members that are coming who asked us if we would figure out a way to participate in, we're not going to go handcuff Netanyahu ourselves particularly, but participate in helping getting Palestinian families of New Yorkers here. And I know that seems like a Band-Aid, but it is one way that we're trying to deal with it.
Yeah, and I think for me, just to give a little more information about my play and my book, I grew up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan and have been mistaken for a Jewish person my entire life. And I don't push that away. That's part of my, shtick, to be even more stereotypical with my language. But I think that those are the spaces, those liminal spaces where, there's a cultural identity that comes with being a New Yorker. And to a lot of people, I seem like an Upper West Side Jewish person. And so these places where we live in the middle and, we live in New York and we have to figure out how to live together. And I think, obviously, if you asked me to raise money for something right now, it would be to help people in Palestine 100% and to stop the killing. That's the major thing. But in terms of what I can do to make, a small difference here in terms of, and this is something I learned from my father, is that it is important to tell stories and to carry this history with us and to not deny it and to not let people deny it. So for us, a lot of it is just saying it out loud is a huge thing, even just being allowed to speak about our history.
And I agree with that tweet. That whatever, did that come in a tweet or a text or something? That yes, this is the overwhelming issue right now, is that people are being not only killed but starved to death, and so we have to, do whatever our part is in that right now, and so one of those things actually is responding to people that are saying, "Can you call your congressperson? Can you help get people out?" Because we found out from people who've been calling us that a lot of the Palestinian families in New York are having to spend a tremendous amount of money for their families to bribe people to get out and get to each next step, which is very common in any fleeing situation, that people need money to bribe their way into the United States or wherever.
You're getting a lot of love in our text messages. People write, "These are beautiful people. Thank you. Monthly segment, please." Another one, "I'd love to simply watch this event. Would they consider streaming it? Many more could learn from it." Another one, "We need more thoughtful across-the-table conversations like this. You give people hope. Thank you." Let's take a call.
And Brian, just quickly, I want to respond to that one text that...
Please.
We decided not to stream it on purpose because we did one little experiment with this and realized that people really want to not be public and want to have the space for small dialogues. And I've done this with my students, broken up into small groups of 4 and had small dialogues. So
yeah, we're also not allowing phones.
We're not
taking away their phones.
And we're thinking this should be a book, that's the space, not streaming.
Let's take a phone call. Namina in Brooklyn, you're on WNYC. Hi, Namina.
Hi, Brian. Good morning. Thank you for taking my call. And I'm a little emotional after I spoke to the young lady. I want to thank the 2 ladies, and I want to know how they get to this point. For both of them, they lost their fathers. To come together to sit on a table and bring something like this. A lot of us are hurting. I came from Sierra Leone. The blood diamond happened and they killed my father. And there is no closure for me because he was in the army and there was no body. So the whole family, we cry every day for every little thing. So I'm saying I don't even have the courage to face the people who are in power at that time. Every time I see them, I get so angry. So for me, these ladies, how do you do it? How did you find that strength? Because I don't have it right now, as you can hear from my voice. I have to go because I'm so emotional. And thank you for taking my call, Brian.
Thank you.
Who wants to talk to Namina?
I do, actually.
Model how you might, because you're going to get that emotion at your events, right?
Yes, and we have that emotion every day, and I invite you to come. There's links on the NYC website, and Brian knows this about me, that I was destroyed for many, many years. I was really... broken up, just the way the caller was speaking. And it was very hard for me to come to terms with my grandmother's suicide because she killed herself when I was 9, and then my father died when I was 12, and then their entire family was killed somewhere in Vitebsk, but I don't really know where. And it took years of therapy, quite frankly, and having people around that understood that this was residual, horrible pain that has no closure, and there's no bodies, right? There's no way to find people. And so I think that that's part of what has inspired me to work with immigrant and refugee teenagers and to do all the work I've been doing for the last 30 years in New York. But it's really, really difficult, and you have to find people who are empathetic ears. And one thing that Najla and I were talking about personally in our friendship is that if you reveal a lot of pain and there's no resolution anywhere and there's no caring for it, it makes it worse. And so we have to find ways, I think, in New York to be able to embrace and hold all the avenues of pain that, like we just heard on the phone.
Yes, and I would also add that the idea of, talking about a country like Sierra Leone, where I'm sure in America a lot of people don't know what's going on there. It's very similar to having, up until recently, being Palestinian. I mean, there's a lot of people who have opinions, but not a lot of people who understand. And it affects us so personally. It's our identity. It's our story. It's our family. And so I think that the way in, even if someone is not from the same world, is to find someone who understands the complexity of being from a region that has issues like this. Because the way it's often portrayed here is there's good guys and bad guys, and it's much more complicated than that. So I would encourage you to come if you would like.
And to at least reach out to us in some way, because the other thing Najla just said, I think that's really important, is that it is things are very complex. And, we interviewed people from Haiti who were living in a neighborhood where somebody else from Haiti, Toto Constant, who had terrorized Haitians, was showing up at their doors selling real estate. So that's a New York thing.
That's a very New York thing.
And I remember when I was going through some grief, and I had said to my friend Frank, who was playing the trumpet on that Diana piece, I said, what are the chances of a woman like me, whose whole family was, my grandmother's family was killed in the Holocaust, and living across the street years later from a guy that we found out had been in the Hitler Youth, and who also fled to Queens, right, in the 50s probably. And I said to Frank, what are the chances of that happening? And he said 100%. And I think that is where we are, Brian, in New York, that, even at my NYU class, there are students from all over the world, from Zimbabwe, from Colombia, the country, not the university, and, from California and from Iowa. And so these stories we're all sitting together in the same space.
Let's take another call. Amy in Ellenville. You're on WNYC. Hi, Amy.
Hi there. I'm usually on the Upper West Side, but at the moment I'm in Ellenville on my way back from the great solar event. And first of all, thank you for what you're doing as Imperfect Allies. And I'm a member of a national grassroots organization, Sisterhood of Salam Shalom, and it's Muslim and Jewish women, and each chapter has to have a Jewish and a Muslim co-chair. And the idea is to get to know each other as friends, and then when hatred strikes, to be able to stand up together. And we have been very, very challenged since October 7th. And so my question for Imperfect Allies is, how have you been able to get the Imperfect Allies to speak to each other, to feel safe, not to feel hatred or anger? Thank you.
We'll have to let you know
Thank
after.
you. And we hear Amy getting emotional about that, too.
We'll let you know after the third one how it goes. I just wanted to clarify something, too, and I think, Amy, I understand you said two things that struck me. One was that if you're friends before a crisis happens, you have a better chance of I don't know what the words are, withstanding it or continuing, because you have a deeper connection. I do think if Najla and I were not friends before this recent bombing of Gaza, that we would not be able to do this in the same way if we didn't have a deeper friendship. And I also wanted to just clarify that Najla's Christian, and so we're not doing Jewish Muslim on purpose. And, I think everything gets framed in ways that are not always accurate. So we have Christian Palestinians coming, Jewish Arabs coming, Jewish Israelis, Palestinian Israelis. We have all these different kinds of people coming, and in the news it gets reduced, or it's Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. Well, we don't really quite understand that all the time.
I know you're aware you're doing this as an era-defining crisis rages on over there for both sides. So much bombing and starvation has come up, and the hostages are still being held. And hopefully this is a meaningful exercise in its own right at any time, but maybe even more so on this day of the Eid and just after Easter, and with Passover coming this month, and also April now being Arab American Heritage Month in the United States, as declared by President Biden in 2021. So this is year 4 of that.
So there's more awareness in general.
So there's, people, might be even closer to this might be closer to the surface for people than it even is anyway with all of this going on right now, although everything is so close to the surface in the last 6 months.
Right, and I think with every time there's mass killing, you hear about numbers of people, and the 32,000 Palestinians or the hostages that are still being held, that those individual people are not just numbers. And when the World Kitchen members got killed, there suddenly becomes new attention, but that's also not new. And in every war, it's when the Americans get killed or the Westerners get killed that people bring attention to it.
But I also wanted to just add one thing. We had a conversation where Judith was telling me something, and I maybe got a little bit worried that I might be offended or uncomfortable. And I said, I have to listen to you with my Jewish ears. And we sort of took that. A lot of, for me, is after October 7th, I've lived in New York my whole life, and most of my friends growing up were Jewish, so I got a lot of vitriol directed at me as the one Palestinian that people know after October 7th, and it was very hurtful, but I think also I know these people so well that I understand why they reacted the way that they did, and that's one of the hardest things to try to do. But just as an example, I finally watched Zone of Interest the other night, and I was reminded of how horrible the Holocaust was. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned this to Judith, and she's the one who said, yeah, but it's also like in his Oscar speech, Jonathan Glazer made the very clear connection between Gaza now and that. And it was Judith who said that, and me who was sort of fixated on what happened in the Holocaust. So we have ways of seeing things through different eyes and different ears. We just have to be open to that, I think.
And in the performance that we're doing together, we often say things at the same time. I need to listen to you with Palestinian ears, as that's coming out of my mouth. Or she's telling a story about her family. But I think that one other thing that's really clear, Brian, is that when I went to Israel for the first time, and I for the only time actually, and I was performing there, but I was also trying to find some of my family in Yad Vashem. I also was invited to be with some Palestinian and Israeli Jewish women that were working together. And I came back and I wrote a story about a grandmother character looking like the grandmother of the Palestinian family. And 25 years ago, I got a lot of pushback and vitriol from mostly Jewish audiences. I also think that for some of my Jewish students that are quick to say that everything is anti-Semitism, criticizing the state of Israel or what's going on or the way Palestinians are treated, when you go there and you see that how people are treated as a Jew, it's brain-crushing and soul-wrenching to think that, okay, we were treated this way and then this is happening. And so I think that can sometimes get interpreted as anti-Semitism, that it might be the first time people are like massively uncomfortable with what they had grown up with thinking.
So I'm sure even just that could start a whole other spate of phone calls, but it's also where we are out of time. And I want to thank Judith Sloan and Najla Said, who are co-creators of this new project called Imperfect Allies, Children of Opposite Sides. There are 3 events coming up in the city tomorrow and Sunday and next Wednesday. Judith, you want to tell people how they can sign up? I think the first 2 are sold out, right?
The easiest thing is to just go to earsay, EARSAY.org, earsay.org, and click on the links and get on the waiting list, because even if they're sold out, 5 people won't show up, because that's the way people are. Even though they answered a question, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be able to show up. So we encourage people to just go to earsay.org, and they can find more information as well.
Anything to add, Najla, as we run out of
No,
time?
but thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
And thank you for doing this. You're getting a lot of love from our audience for even trying. Thank you very, very much.